We are live. Hi, everyone. My name is Sam Osterhout. I'm the executive producer here at Lincoln Square. And I'm really excited to have a friend of the show, actually, somebody we've had on before. But Michael, it's been a minute, I
It's
believe.
been a minute, but I wish could say we've accomplished so much in that minute. And the fact is, at least down in Washington, D.C., we've accomplished very little. And that is so frustrating.
It's incredibly frustrating, and I think. Well, let me introduce you first. Michael Barasch is an attorney, and you've represented literally thousands of our heroes who stepped into the fray on 9/11. We're coming up to the 24th anniversary, which seems crazy to me that it's already been that long. Before we, when I say it's been a minute since we've had you on, it feels like it's been 1,000 years. And like you said, nothing really has changed, except something has changed. We have the big, beautiful bill that's swept across.
Please don't call it that.
Yeah, what the big beautiful betrayal, I think, as we've started to call it. Before we get into that, I just want to sort of remind everyone of your background. And you didn't. I mean, 9/11 happened to you in a. You were kind of like a first responder in a way. Can you tell us that story?
All right, let's not get carried away here. I'm one of those. I'm one of those people you see covered in dust running uptown on the West Side Highway away
Mhm.
from the building that had just imploded.
Right.
The real heroes were the guys coming towards the buildings, the firefighters, cops, EMTs. Those are the guys who are the heroes. Um, the most heroic thing I did was help bake lasagna for the firefighters who were so depressed and so bereft at the loss of all their companions. But I did that like so many other tens of thousands of New Yorkers. It was the only thing we could think to do to try to help them. But while we were in the firehouses, and your listeners should realize that my law firm represented firefighters who used to get injured in the line of duty before 9/11.
Right.
So I was very much involved with the New York City firefighters and cops as well. And when we visited these firehouses, we kept hearing these people coughing. And the FDNY medical office actually called it the World Trade Center cough because they didn't know what else to call it. And it just didn't go away. And it clearly didn't help that those buildings were on fire for 99 days while these guys were walking in the rubble and trying to find, at least for the first 2 weeks, desperate to find some survivors. I think they found a total of 19 survivors in the first few days, and that
Oh
was
my
it.
God.
But that didn't stop the families wanting to recover their loved ones. So who was going to do it? Well, it certainly wasn't going to be the personal injury lawyers. It was the firefighters, the cops, the
Right.
construction workers, the debris removal people, the sanitation workers who get no credit at all, and they do. And everybody, Sam, was exposed to the same toxic dust, which, as you may recall, Christy Todd Whitman of the EPA assured us all that the air was safe to breathe. Well, that wasn't true. They
Right.
were pretty concerned about opening Wall Street, which they did the next week. So maybe they were right in doing what they did. It certainly was at a huge cost to the 50,000 school children who returned to their schools around Ground Zero, including 3,000 kids at Stuyvesant High School, which they used their auditorium as a mortuary. They
Oh my
would
God.
dump body parts in the auditorium while these kids were at school. And then they would dump debris at the wharf on the Hudson River right behind Stuyvesant High School. And every time they would dump debris, the smoke would go everywhere. I mean, just imagine your listeners who aren't from New York or might be too young to remember. The smoke was everywhere. And these kids are going to school starting in October there while their windows were open because it was so beautiful during the fall, breathing all these toxins. Well, so were 300,000 other office workers. And as I mentioned, there were 20,000 young people at the Bureau of Manhattan Community College, also right next to Ground Zero. So this was a real toxic brew, and everybody was exposed, not just the first responders.
Right. And so you had already been working with firefighters and first responders in that capacity.
Mhm.
But how? What was your you know what was your catalyst? What happened that made you get involved? Because how many people have you represented over
Oh,
the
now
past
it's
20?
well over, it's now well over 40,000 people, from everywhere, from people with cough
Hmm.
to they've now linked 69 cancers to the World Trade Center toxins. And how do they know this? People always say, well, Michael, I had skin cancer, but so did my dad. Or I had prostate cancer, so did my dad. I had
Sure.
breast cancer, so did my mom. They do this all like so scientifically. They use data. Hello,
Right.
something we all remember studying in school, but they take a look at what percentage of adults, what percentage of young adults, including, have all these different cancers. And there was a study done at Mount Sinai that linked um, blood cancers, multiple myeloma, leukemia, and lymphoma to the
Hmm.
World Trade Center toxins. And the grant people, the doctors there, determined that you're 41% more likely to develop those blood cancers if you were exposed to the World Trade Center toxins compared to people your age who were never exposed. Well,
Wow.
that's considered medically very significant. And
Yep.
every cancer has a different percentage that is also considered medically significant. The most common cancers linked are skin cancers. And I can't tell you how many firefighters will tell me, "Oh, I'm fine," and I'll say, "Well, what's that scar on your cheek?" "Oh, that's nothing. I just had a little Mohs surgery." "Well, what'd you have the Mohs surgery for?" "Oh, basal cell." They don't
Well,
believe that basal cell skin cancer is cancer. Well, it
right.
is. They're entitled to all their copays and deductibles paid for by the government. And oh, by the way, they're also entitled to $90,000. But they don't realize it, and they really care more about other people than themselves. But when I explain to them that they're not taking away from other people, that they have a duty to take care of their family in case you're not going to die of basal cell skin cancer, but you could get pancreatic cancer,
Sure.
which so many of my clients have had, brain cancer, liver cancer, kidney cancer. Prostate cancer is the second most common cancer. And guys don't realize there's a presumption now linking all these cancers. I don't know if I mentioned it in the last interview I did with you guys, but I represented Detective Jimmy Zadroga. He
Hmm.
was a 34-year-old police officer from New York City who died of pulmonary fibrosis. That's like black lung disease. You basically
Right.
suffocate to death. So I talked to the family and we said, this is so unusual. How do you feel about doing an autopsy? And they did. And
Hmm.
inside his lung tissue, they found ground glass,
Oh my God.
asbestos, lead, benzene. These are all known carcinogens. And that was the evidence that NIOSH finally needed to link all these cancers and respiratory illnesses. And let's give Congress credit, not this Congress, but the Congress
We'll get to
in
that.
2000, the Congress in 2010, they passed the James Zedroga Health and Compensation Act, which created both the World Trade Center Health Program, which is a wonderful nationwide program
Hmm.
when it's funded, and the Victim Compensation Fund, which gives awards to people when the health program certifies an illness. So things were doing very well as far as making it up to these people who all they did was believe the government when they told us it was safe to come back to school. It was
Right.
safe to come back to the office. I mean, my office was just 2.5 blocks from ground zero. I saw the second tower hit. I watched like a deer in headlights, Sam, as dozens of people were just jumping out of the buildings. And my wife was calling me on the phone saying, "Michael, get out of there." And I said to her kind of stupidly, "They're not going to attack 11 Park Place," never realizing there was a
Right.
possibility that that building could collapse, let alone both of them. And when they did collapse, me and my associates went running down the stairs. By the time we hit the lobby, it was just filled with that smoke. I mean, that's how fast that smoke enveloped us.
Right.
But look, I'm doing okay. Not everybody in my office is doing well. I lost my secretary, Liana Rivera, to breast cancer at the age of 47. I lost my paralegal, Dennis Cotter, to kidney cancer at the age of 49. I'm a prostate cancer survivor. My secretary, Barbara, is a leukemia survivor. A bunch of other people have respiratory protections because when we came back, those buildings were, I mean, I don't know if you were downtown, Sam, but you'd walk out of the subway and it would hit you in the face, that
Right.
smoke. And but we're the lucky ones. But this is why I take this so personally and why I'm fighting in Washington now to get Congress to do the right thing and fully fund the health program.
Well, so let me ask you this, and just before we get to this Congress, you said that the act came through in 2010, but that's considerably far from 2001. What was that fight like in the interim between 2001 and 2010? Because as I understand it, it was a complicated, sort of chaotic mess. And what
Right.
took them so long to get to that point, even?
What took Congress so long to do anything? Sometimes
Right.
they can't even agree what day of the week it is. No, but we're not here to bash Congress. Come
Sure.
on, we love Congress.
Yeah, they're great.
Okay. Anyway, we Congress, 3 weeks after 9/11, passes a bill called the Air Stabilization Bill. What they wanted to make sure was that all these people, their families, nearly 3,000, didn't sue the airlines for their poor security.
Okay.
And they were afraid that that would bankrupt American and United Airlines. So, I mean, you'd like to think, well, they also did it because they didn't want these people to have to face years of litigation after just
Sure.
losing their loved one, which might be true also. I mean, two things can be true at the same time. But in any case, that first bill, 3 weeks after Congress, it created the Victim Compensation Fund.
Hmm.
And President Bush appointed a gentleman by the name of Ken Feinberg, who had overseen many mass disasters like Agent Orange. And he was just trying to get the rules started, but there was so much anger out there, especially from the people who I was representing, the firefighter widows. They didn't want some sort of quick settlement. They wanted the people who were responsible. They wanted justice.
Sure.
And I have to tell you, Mr. Feinberg did an amazing job convincing people to drop their pending lawsuits and go to the victim fund, which guaranteed a fair award. Look, no amount of money could bring back a firefighter or a Cantor Fitzgerald guy or a dishwasher at Windows on the World. And they all made lots of different amounts of money. So, how do you figure out what is life worth? Well, there was a movie made based on a book Mr. Feinberg wrote called Worth with Michael Keaton. I don't know how many people saw that movie, but it really shows you how hard it was for Mr. Feinberg to do what he did, which was to convince people, don't go to litigation. We will take care of you, the federal government. And the
Right.
government ended up giving away about $7 billion. I think 99% of the families who lost a loved one were ended up going into that program. But the people who were not included in the original bill written by Congress were the people who had latent illnesses, the people
Right.
who were coughing. And so it's Christmas vacation of 2001. I'm
Hmm.
in Jamaica, not in Queens, but in Jamaica in the islands. I'm on vacation with my family and I'm watching a football game. And there are these three snot-nosed kids watching the game on the other side of the bar. They're rooting for the Redskins. I'm rooting for the Giants. But you know, if you're a sports fan, you start talking and
Of course.
schmoozing and giving each other trash talking. And at
Hmm.
the end of the game, don't ask me who won. I asked them, what do they do? One of them was in law school, two of them were in college, and I told them what I do, and they said, "Oh, would you like us to introduce you to our father? His name is Ken Feinberg.
No.
He'll be coming down tonight, and we'd love you to meet." So I call up my secretary, Barbara. I said, fax me. There was no email at that time. I said, fax me to the hotel, the air sampling reports, some medical reports. And on Christmas morning of 2001, I had breakfast with Ken Feinberg. And I told him about these 600 firefighters and cops who were coughing and for whom I had filed notices of claim. So, for those of you out there who are not attorneys, in order to sue the city of New York, You first have to file a notice of claim within 90 days. That preserves your right to sue the city. And I was suing, claiming these guys had this cough. They were calling it, whether it was asthma, reactive airways disease, the World Trade Center cough. But
Yep.
these guys were at risk of losing their careers. You know, you could be a reporter, Sam, and I can be a lawyer with asthma, but you can't be a firefighter if you have asthma. You're going to lose your career.
Yeah, right.
So Feinberg says to me, well, bring them into the Victim Compensation Fund. I need to convince more widows to come into the fund. They're really not doing it. And if I can show them 600 firefighters are now joining the fund for their respiratory illnesses, that will help them because you don't have to sue. And believe me, I didn't want to sue the city for
Right.
failing to give respiratory protection, but I had a pretty good case because OSHA rules mandate that you give your employees safe equipment. And they
Right.
obviously didn't have the safe equipment. But I'd rather go to the victim fund than sue the city.
Hmm.
And he says, come see me in January when we're back from vacation. Well, I'm sure I ruined his vacation because every day I saw him at the pool or at the beach, I'd say, oh, Mr. Feinberg, look what I just got. A new fax from New York, another medical record, another report on the quality of the air.
Anybody who
Anyway,
sits across from you as an adversary is going to get their vacation ruined. That's my
no,
sense about
I don't
you.
know if I was just helping him think about what was waiting for him back in New York. Anyway, um, yeah, maybe I did ruin it. Anyway, I will also say this: Mr. Feinberg was the most important man in my professional life
Wow.
because when he met me in January, I brought with me. I told him I'd come into his office. We made an appointment. Just I happened to have with me three New York City firefighters, an epidemiologist, and an actuary, and they explained how their health had been impacted. The actuary talked about their future lost incomes because they were all going to have to retire from the fire department.
Yep.
And the pulmonologist tied it all together. And Mr. Feinberg said to me, if you drop your lawsuits, I'll do away with the 72-hour requirement that required you to see a doctor within 72 hours to be eligible. And I explained to Mr. Feinberg, no firefighter was going to get off the pile to go see a doctor about a cough
No.
if there was still a chance people were living, if there was a chance they could find body parts for people and and let them have a funeral. Do you remember how many
Right.
funerals there were,
Of
one after
course.
another? I mean, 343 firefighters died, 60 Port Authority and NYPD officers died, and not to mention the countless people in the office buildings. So anyway, Feinberg did an amazing thing, doing away with that 72-hour requirement. And for the next 2.5 years, I represented about 1,000 sick people, not to mention the people I represented who lost loved ones that
Hmm.
day. But then the fun ended in December of 2003. So we spent the next 6 years lobbying Congress to reopen the victim fund. We didn't have any proof that cancers were linked at that point, but
Right.
but more and more guys kept losing their careers because of their reactive airways disease or their asthma. And then in 2010, they named the bill the Zadroga Health and Compensation Act because of Jimmy Zadroga's autopsy. He gave us the proof we needed.
That's, I mean, it's an incredible story, and it's persistence on your part
And luck.
and luck. Yeah, I mean, that Jamaica story is wild. That's a
Yeah.
wild story. And it needed to happen. So I want to fast forward then, um, because I feel like over the past, John Stewart got involved in
Yep.
advocacy and was able to raise visibility, um, and get some things moving. But with nobody out front, we forget, right? And I feel like this, it's the big bill. We won't say beautiful, is doing something. That is really kind of disgusting. Can you talk about what's happened in this bill? I mean, look, we've talked about, on Lincoln Square, we've talked about how they are funding a, private army for, ICE raids and this kind of thing. That we've talked about the Medicare and Medicaid cuts. We've talked about all, the funneling the taxes, the wealth upward, all of this. But this is a piece I don't think anyone's really talking about.
Right. Well, they do talk about it on 9/11, but I'm just going to go back a little bit.
Yes.
We so Thank you, John Stewart, and thank you, Sam, for acknowledging him, because without John, we would not have had the visibility we needed in 2019 when he had the forum to publicly shame those congressmen and senators who every 9/11 they would post on their websites. Today we remember, we honor our first responders. We'll never forget them. But we were trying to get the Victim Compensation Fund and the World Trade Center Health Program permanently extended. When it was originally passed in 2010 into law, it was only extended for 5 years. We had to
Right.
go back, lobbying and showing how sick these guys were getting. And between 2010 and 2015, that's when NIOSH, with all these grants that they remember grants when NIOSH had money to give grants to doctors to study, not politicians, to
Right.
doctors.
Yep.
And they linked 68 cancers at that point to those toxins. So we had a lot of ammunition, but all Congress would do was extend the Victim Fund and the World Trade Center Health Program for 5 more years. So it was back in 2019. That's when Jon Stewart got involved, shaming Congress. And thankfully, Congress permanently extended both programs till 2090. Why 2090? Because they figured by then, most of the infants born in Battery Park City
Right.
will have been old enough to have either gotten or not gotten World Trade Center illnesses. So everything was fine except medical inflation and the explosion of cancers. See,
Right.
nobody really anticipated those. So we were faced with a shortfall for the health program, not for the Victim Compensation Fund. That is safe and permanently extended. But the two programs work hand in hand. So
Sure.
if you don't have the health program certify you with a 9/11 illness, you can't get an award from the Victim Compensation Fund, which happens to be permanently funded. So
Right.
it's ironic. What Mr. Musk did was he eviscerated both programs.
Oh my
So
God.
we were in Washington in December to celebrate Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney. She was one of the leaders in 2010 of bringing attention to the first, not only the first responders, but for the whole 9/11 community, that this cough, these illnesses weren't going away. She lost her election to Jerry Nadler when they did some gerrymandering. And now that she was retired, there was going to be a plaque unveiling, a portrait unveiling in Congress. And
Mhm.
at the same time, we were there to celebrate with her this $3 billion that the health program was needed, that was in the omnibus bill in December of last year. And while we were in there about to unveil her portrait, Elon Musk sends out a tweet to every Republican, congressman, and senator: do not vote for this budget. Now,
What?
he wasn't specifically attacking the World Trade Center funding that was in the budget, he was attacking everything.
Well,
So
he doesn't know what
he's
he's
not
doing. I mean, this
elected.
is the problem with ignorance, right? And
A-
arrogance.
And by the way, the ironic thing for me is so many of my clients are cops and firefighters.
Yep.
Yes, I represent people from, because the toxic dust didn't care if you were Republican or Democrat. But what's so ironic, Sam, is so many of my clients voted for Trump and their jaws hit the floor when
Right.
they heard that the funding for the health program was gone. So Mr. Trump becomes president January 20th. Mr. Musk, do you remember those fond days when the two of them were lovebirds?
Oh my
S-
God.
So Musk, in one of his first uh, pronouncements as the head of Doge, he cuts all healthcare 20%. Well, that included the World Trade Center Health Program that was already underfunded and
Right.
understaffed. There were supposed to be originally 138 doctors and nurses in this program. They were already down to 88. And now he cut the staff by 20%. Well, there was a bipartisan outcry because I said this to you off the air, this is not just a New York issue.
No.
My clients live in all 50 states. Responders, this is so quaint. Those of your listeners who are only aware of how Republicans, Democrats can't get along, there was a time after 9/11 where everyone got along.
Yep.
And responders came from all over the country to help out. Every FEMA task force member, retired firefighters and cops who used to work in New York and New Jersey, they came back to volunteer. And since then, tens and tens of thousands of people, office workers, students have dispersed all over the country. And the health program is in all 50 states and Puerto Rico, and it's working great, except it's underfunded because so many people continue to get sick.
Yeah.
So we had the funding, Musk took it away. He cuts it by 20%. When there was an outcry, Trump ordered that 20% be reversed. He goes, "Oh, we didn't mean the health program." So what does Musk do? He fires 16 of the doctors in the health program, including John Howard, the head doctor. So now overall, I think all of the CDC has been cut $1.5 billion, which has severely crippled the health program. And it's not an understatement to say that this bureaucratic cruelty will cost lives.
Of
Because people, early detection saves lives, Sam.
course.
And when you go for an annual exam and they catch something that looks funny, you can start doing more testing and more treatment right away. If you don't go for that annual exam, you're more likely to catch your cancer in stage 3 and 4. And that's why, even though 69 cancers have been linked to the toxins, if you are in the health program, you're more likely to live.
Of course.
So now you've got an 8-month wait to get an appointment rather than a 4-month wait.
Eh,
Do the math.
Yeah,
People are going to
those 4
die.
months are the difference between life and death for a lot of
Yes.
patients, and I think
Yes.
it's compelling because when it happened in September of 2001, I think a lot of people who have never lived in New York don't understand the sheer amount of people downtown on any given day. But think of it, the boat lift. It was the biggest marine evacuation in the history of humankind.
Yeah. By the way, shout out to Tom Hanks and that 10-minute YouTube video on the
Oh,
boat lift. That is
and
amazing. Everybody should watch that.
it's an incredible story, but this touched everyone. So what do we do? What happens now, and what is the state? So we're underfunded. The resources are dwindling. Where's our hope, and what do we do?
Okay, there is hope. We're going back to the playbook. I mean, fortunately, because I have 40,000 clients living all over the country,
Yep.
what we've been doing is galvanizing my clients, firefighters who live in Wyoming, Arizona, cops who live in California, North Carolina, South Carolina, and telling them, here's the name and number of Senator Lindsey Graham. Tell him that he always says he never forgets, but it's not the funding we needed was left out of the big beautiful budget. Tell him we need this funding, and we're going to be trying to attach it to the national defense budget this
Mhm.
September.
Okay.
I made 7 trips to Washington, visiting with a whole mess of retired firefighters, cops, the Feel Good Foundation. I don't know if you heard of John Feel. He's an amazing
Yeah. Yeah.
force.
Yep.
Anyway, he is working on this tirelessly. We have 70 some odd co-sponsors now for a new bill that will attach to the national defense budget. And this spring, I made trips to Raleigh, Charlotte, South Carolina, to 7 to Tampa, telling these retirees to call their constituents because this is not a New York issue. That's the
Right.
biggest pushback we get, Sam, are these politicians say, New York wants another handout.
Not
So we have
exactly.
to educate these people and make these people who are Trump lovers realize that right now, Mr. Trump has a lot on his plate. I get it, but this should be one of them. And he signed the bill in 2019. I was in the Rose Garden in July of 2019 when he extended the Victim Compensation Fund to 2090. I know he's in favor of this, but nobody's telling him, hey, look how these budget cuts have hurt the 9/11 community.
In other words, we've got to ruin a lot of vacations.
Well, let's think how good everyone's going to feel when they're on vacation and they know they're doing the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, I think it's such it's such an incredibly important issue, but I also think it provides this image of where we are as a people. If we can't care for those who did the work to save us, and those who were there, and those who were on the ground, who are we? What are we doing?
And what's going to happen the next time they tell us the air is safe? Would you do that if you knew your family was at risk? They may
Right?
not get disability pensions. If you die, they may not get death benefits. You know, you got to think this could happen anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would love to have you back, Michael. This was such an important conversation, and if you have any clients who would love to come on, I'm sure our audience would love to hear their stories. I know it's 9/11 season again, so I'm sure you'll be getting the media calls, but I would
I
love to
will
have
be,
you
but
on when it's not September and
Sam, I
August.
appreciate you shining a light on this, and it'll be my pleasure to come back with some responders, with some former school children. You know, it's important. I think people realize there are 27-year-old women there who were only 4 years old. They don't remember 9/11, and now they have breast cancer because they
Right.
lived in Battery Park, and their parents, went back to live there when they were told the air was safe.
Well, I would love to help tell those stories so that we can galvanize some action.
Terrific. Thank you.
So,
I really appreciate your
I
time.
appreciate your work. Thank you, Michael.
Bye
Thanks,
bye.
everyone.